video? Oh, that's a video?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sit straight down for you.
There we go. Okay, I'm here with Ross Douma, the head men's basketball coach at Dordt College, and thought we'd just stop in and just check in with Coach and ask him a few questions. If you would, first, Coach, maybe take us through your background as a coach.
Coach Brown, I started coaching after I graduated from Northwestern College in the fall of 1995. My first job was at Hartley Melvin Sanborn. I spent 6 years at HMS. I was 3 years as an assistant, 3 years as a head coach there. From there, I traveled to Chicago, coached at Chicago Christian for 5 years, 4 of those being a head coach. From there, I moved back to the state of Iowa and moved to the Des Moines metropolitan area, where I was at Waukee High School for 3 years. And then from Waukee, I arrived here at Dordt College, and I'm entering my 3rd season here.
That's terrific. Can you tell us, just kind of philosophically, what you stand for as a coach? Just maybe why you got into coaching and the types of things that motivate you as a coach.
Sure. I think I was fortunate growing up that I just had some outstanding coaches who were great mentors, and they made the game fun. They were guys who really enjoyed coaching. High school coach was Jim Ekoff at Hall Western Christian, and then from there I moved to Northwestern College and had Todd Berry, who recently retired at Briar Cliff. I think those two guys were very instrumental. I think other people along the way, Earl Walstra, who was my coach also at Northwestern, he recently retired from the women's program there. And also Lauren DeYoung, who's still currently the coach at Morris Orange City Floyd Valley. I think those 4 guys played a pretty significant role in shaping me in terms of the impact that a coach can have on people.
Great. Share with me, if you would, especially for the young coaches in our state, what that first year was like as a head coach.
Yeah, going into your first job, you basically know what your high school coach did, and also if you had the chance to be involved with the college program, which your college coach was able to do. And I think you take those things without a whole lot of really understanding coaching as a profession, and you jump right in. It's vastly different if you played in high school or played in college to remove yourself from a role as a player to somebody who's now leading a program or leading a team, and it takes a lot more emotional and mental energy, I think, than probably I realized at the time. I thought it was good in that I was given my own team. I was a JV team early and just allowed to basically be my own coach. And you learn from successes along the way, but you certainly learn from mistakes and failures along the way as well. And I think your student teaching experience and your first 2 years as coaching are the years that really shape you in terms of where you start to derive a philosophy in terms of coaching and mentoring.
What advice would you give young coaches as a couple really key things as they step into even an assistant's job or a head coaching job?
I think the big thing is just try to network so you can lean on people when maybe times get a little tough. There's certainly going to be times early on in your coaching career where you question yourself, and I think being able to fall back on people who have some experience, who have had the opportunity to be in the profession for a while, I think that's really critical. I also think it's important just to have a hunger to constantly want to get better, to constantly be at clinics and understand the game. If I coached it the same way that I played it in the early '90s, here in the 2010s, 2011s, 2012s year, we'd be in trouble. I mean, the game is constantly evolving, constantly changing, and it's important, I think, as coaches to have that desire to want to stay ahead there on the frontier and constantly get better.
Dealing with parents really is one of the big obstacles, if you would, for all coaches, especially young coaches. But share with me just some of your perspectives on maybe some experiences you've had with parents and again, from an advice standpoint.
Sure. I think a lot of what I do, I take from Coach Don Meyer, who is at David Lipscomb, and then most recently at Northern State. And he just basically, I guess, emphasized the need to make sure you're up front, parents understand where the ground rule's at. And that is, we're never going to talk about playing time with a parent. I think that's important to lay that in front of them at a preseason meeting. I think a preseason meeting is good. It shows that you're organized. It shows that you have a plan. It shows that you are interested in the parent's child. No playing time. The other is, we're not going to talk about another player on the team. I think if those two things are in place, I think that's critical. I'll talk about any other topic with a parent pertaining to their child, any way that we can help them grow in any aspect of their life. But in terms of the playing time and another player on the team, those things are basically hands off. Mm-hmm. And with that said, there are some districts that are better at it than others. Sometimes you enter into certain districts where parents have been known to, be very involved with the program. And I think if you're going into a situation like that, I think it's really important to consult with your athletic director initially and say, this is my plan, this is how I'm going to proceed, and I would really like your support with that. I think having coached at 3 different high schools, I think that the athletic director and you have to be on the same page, and I think you really have to win them over and really seek out their advice, but also really understand if he or she is willing to go into some of those dark corners with you. And I would really encourage young coaches to understand the importance of what an athletic director / administrator can do for their coaching career.
Mm-hmm. Great. Here at Dordt, what do you think your biggest challenges are in terms of coaching and trying to win games?
I think one of our biggest challenges is I believe we play in the best NAIA conference in the country. I think there's some outstanding basketball, small college basketball in the Midwest, Iowa in particular. In our league, we have Northwestern, Morningside, Briar Cliff. Those are 3 other schools here in Iowa. They just have outstanding players and outstanding coaches. So I think the competition, first and foremost, makes it very challenging. I think looking at just our school as a whole, I think the fact that we have great kids, we have outstanding kids. It's an outstanding academic institution. I think with that, we're fighting the toughness, the mental toughness, the physical toughness that our kids possess, and really trying to move them past the brink of being hard competitors when they step on the floor, and then going back and being an outstanding student, an outstanding person when they walk outside the gym.
On the subject of toughness, tell me, what you talk to your players about in terms of toughness. What do you look for? Because we all understand that many times the tougher team wins. Most of the time it's not a physical toughness at all.
Right.
So maybe your description or your definition of toughness.
I think what we try to impress upon our kids is toughness is not the physical side, as you alluded to, Coach. It's not throwing an elbow. It's not getting a cheap shot in when nobody's looking. That's not toughness in our opinion. It's being able to cancel a play when something goes wrong. It's being able to move on quickly to the next play. I know Coach Krzyzewski at Duke, his line is next play, and I think that's the first and foremost step. We try to teach our guys body language. We think that's really important. We think communication is really important. And some people don't classify those things necessarily as mental toughness, but it has to do with oneness as well. It's about establishing, we believe, a really positive culture of accountability, and we think that those things are vital for that to take place. So those are some of the things that we talk about. We have to be very deliberate here at Dordt about that. We need our players to know what it looks like. And we'll use examples from college, from the NBA, just how to have that poise, concentration, when things sometimes don't go as planned.
How do you guys like to play on the offensive end?
Offensively, we're pretty up-tempo. I think last year we averaged just a little over 80 points a game. And we like to do that because, for one, that's my coaching personality. That's who I am, and for better, for worse, that's where we're gonna start. And I think when people talk about scoring a lot of points, they believe it's just grabbing the rebound and getting out and running really fast. But truth be told, it really starts with the defensive end. It's how much pressure you put on the basketball is going to probably determine more than anything how many offensive possessions you're going to get per game. And so we do put a lot of pressure on the ball defensively in an attempt to get the game up tempo. And then you have to rebound it very well, and then you have to take care of it very well. And we think that those things are vital to us scoring, in the upper 70s, lower 80s, which is what we like to do.
How much do you guys utilize the 3-point shot, and how do you determine, in working with roles in players, we, we love in a perfect world, everybody can shoot them because everybody can make them, but we know that's not the case. How do you kind of integrate the 3-point game into your offensive scheme?
In terms of the transition game, we look for two things: layups or 3-pointers, and so that's probably the 3-point line is established early in terms of our offensive possession. It's also established early in the season in the first few days of practice that we are going to utilize the arc. We recruit players who can shoot the basketball beyond the arc. We run a 4-1 motion offense, so we need kids who can stretch the defense and who are versatile on the offensive end that way. But as we get into it, get closer to the first game, we do sit down and we do talk about each player individually. We talk about role definition, and then we come together as a team and we talk about each player's role. So there's no miscommunication. There's no gray area. We understand exactly what we want from each player. In terms of shooting the 3-point shot, we will give them off-season programs and we will give them skill workouts to try to improve that. But when we get into October, then we really bring that closer and we say, this is what we think you're capable of, and this is where we need you to help the team. And players have to demonstrate that to us in the off season and preseason. Once we get into the season, it's almost too late to start saying, well, I'm a 3-point shooter and I deserve to have my range extended in that. We believe that's where the off season is, and that's where the investment comes from.
Mm-hmm. Down on the defensive end, could you tell us a little bit about maybe just a little bit of defensive philosophy and then maybe just some things system-wise you like to do?
Sure. I think defensively I've evolved quite a bit over the 15 years that I've been coaching. Initially when I came out, I used what I knew in high school and college, and that is butt to the ball, hand in the passing lane, challenge everything. And I think as time has gone on, coaching in rural areas, coaching in metropolitan areas, you make changes. For a while I used a lot of run and jump. When I was in Chicago, I thought we had some really good athletes, and used it at Waukee as well because I thought that we were very small, particularly in the guard court, and I didn't think that we could fist fight people in the half court in the 20 to 25 foot range as well as we would have liked to. So we did some things there, but as we get into college here and you get to recruit to your personnel a little bit, we're really comfortable with using sort of the Dick Bennett / Ben Jacobson UNI pack line a little bit. They differ just a little bit between those two guys. Dick Bennett uses an open stance. Coach Jacobson uses somewhat of a closed stance, and that's kind of what we're at as well. We really put a lot of pressure on the ball within that defense. We really get off and help. It's called we call the mid-point line, and we bring a lot of pressure, or we bring a lot of help to the ball because we know with a lot of pressure that it's going to get probably penetrated against us there. And we really make a concerted effort not to get beat on rhythm 3-pointers and not to get beat on the block. And if somebody's going to beat us, they're going to, hopefully on a particular possession, they're hitting an 18-foot jump shot off the bounce. And that's what an ideal possession would look like for us.
Tell me about fouling. Some coaches don't say anything about it, and their kids do a pretty good job. And others really sort of coach around not fouling. What's your take on that here?
We like to have our kids talk to the officials a little bit about that. I heard Coach Stacey talk once about closing out on the ball retreat, hands off, where you're teaching yourself, reminding yourself, but you're also talking to the official at the same time as well. We do talk about fouling. We believe, the statistics that are really important to us are turnovers, rebounds, and free throws, and you can control the opposing team getting to the foul line. We believe that that's not something that's just by chance or fate or in the officials' hands. We believe that's in our hands, and I don't know why you'd want to coach any other way, leaving your success to chance. And so we teach our kids that that's something we control: body position, active hands, active feet, but using the chest when appropriate. And I think that's the mindset that we take, is that something that we can and should dictate.
Mm-hmm. Practice-wise, can you talk about practice planning and how you go about that?
Sure. What we do, Coach, is we spend the first 8 minutes of each practice doing some dynamic agilities, dynamic stretching, just trying to improve the overall athleticism of our players. And there'll be a few minutes where we do the same thing virtually every day from the beginning of the season to the end of the season in terms of our stretching routine. But then there'll be a 5-minute segment where we're changing things up. We use a lot of Ellen Stein stuff in terms of just developing different types of coordinations, just making the kids more acutely aware of their athletic abilities and how we can slowly bring that along. So that's the first thing that we do. And then we do something where we saw this with Bill Finley at Iowa State, where we just put 10 minutes on the clock and we just run dummy offense. It's just kind of more mental rehearsal than anything else. When the 10 minutes is up, then we know that that's where we really started to get into things. We use a lot of full court drills at that time early in practice, 2-on-0 up to 5-on-0. Because we are an up-tempo team, it's important for us to learn how to play when we're a little bit tired all the way through practice, so we do some things there. It's a good way also to work on some of the full court transition fundamentals. And then once we get through that, we usually have about an hour left of practice, and then we go offense, defense, or vice versa in terms of specific drills or breakdown drills relating to the game of basketball and what we were trying to accomplish in a particular year.
Do you spend a lot of time in your practices with position work, or are those types of things done before the season?
And we will spend some time. Being an NAIA school, we do have a little bit more time than some of the NCAA schools in terms of player time with the staff. And so we will do that in the preseason, particularly in the month of September. But once we get into the season, we will continue with that as well. Our players are well versed in terms of their position along with their position coach, and we will spend 20 minutes to 25 minutes a day with their various positions. It will not be in one block segment. We'll keep coming back to those maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times within a practice where we're doing perimeter and post work. But by the time the practice is over, usually we've spent about 20 minutes in breakdown work, specific position only.
Mm-hmm. Using assistant coaches, specifically in practice, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I think it's important to get them invested into the practice setting, invested into the program. Depending on their ability as an assistant coach, has to obviously be some mentoring on the head coach's part, and that might mean entire summer, entire fall of just doing weekly meetings to make sure that you're as specific and precise as you need to be. On other occasions, it may not take that much time at all, depending on his skill set or her skill set. But we think that's important to incorporate them in some capacity for a number of reasons. So the players can see that we're a program and that we're not driven by one particular personality. Now, obviously, the head coach's personality is going to override the program, but I think the players need to understand it is a program. I think you also see a lot of times in high school coaching a lot of burnout, a lot of turnover amongst assistant coaches. I think if you look at the really good programs where guys feel that they've had a lot of say, they've had a lot of involvement, they're around for quite a while. And I think that that's something to probably keep in the back of your mind as well. But we do try to use them in practice quite a bit. Sometimes, if they're very good, we'll give them obviously a greater reign and a greater role. And if they're a little bit young and green, we'll try to shrink those roles up a little bit, and then try to keep them really good in a more particular, precise area. But at some point, the kids have got to see that you are putting something in the hands of, I think, the assistant coach to various degrees.
So, for a high school coach, Ross, talk about, if you would, just about maybe how to go about putting the practice plan together and the types of things that you should be addressing each day.
You know, I think when I think back to when I began coaching, some of the areas that I neglected early on, press offense was one, transition defense was probably another. I think those are the 2 areas that I maybe overlooked. And the other area that if I had to go back and start all over again was just to be a bit more creative and take a few more chances. You know, when I began coaching in the mid-90s, the numbered break offensively was really the thing that people were doing. And a lot of times I pigeonholed kids instead of letting them just be basketball players. And that's probably, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't get so caught up on positions as opposed to just a skill set. And if you have to play with 4 kids under 6 feet in high school, I think you can still be very successful doing that, as opposed to bringing a kid off who's maybe not 6'5" and somewhat cumbersome on the floor. The other thing I would say that I probably need to do a better job of is, oh shoot, coach, what was it? What was I thinking?
It's all right.
Oh, I know. I think coming out of college and using some of my experiences early on, I think I had some teams early in my coaching career that I maybe burnt out by the end of the season. I don't know that I did a great job of shortening up practices and keeping them fresh early on. I think Bear Bryant at Alabama said it right. He said more championships are lost from overtraining than undertraining, and certainly we want our athletes to be in shape. But I think there comes a point where we're obviously we're counterintuitive to that, and I think I was probably guilty of that early on.
I had a coach recently say, when you ask the question to yourself, have we gone long enough, or should we keep going, or should we? Yeah. Is it time to get off the floor? Yeah. It's usually time to get off the floor.
It is.
But yet it's hard for us as coaches because less is more is kind of a hard one to deal with as a coach. We kind of always feel like we can get a little bit better if we're out there. So, yeah, I think that's a challenge. And a lot of high school coaches obviously have limited time. And
right.
So maybe that's another, if you could just comment on what you do with limited time and the whole facility predicament as a high school coach.
Sure. I think one of the things that we began doing as a high school coach is we had some team meetings before and after practice. We had our kids, and I got this from Don Meyer, our kids had notebooks, and we went through a lot of mental rehearsal before we hit the floor, because at some of the schools I was at, and I'm sure that's the case for many people yet today, you have just an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes a day on the floor. And I think that's really hard to get things in. Sometimes before your first game, you maybe have 12, maybe 13 practices before that first contest. Mm-hmm. And so it's really difficult, and you really feel that you're in a pinch to get things in. So we did some things outside of practice. We also got creative where we did a lot of work with ball handling stuff and some dynamic work in the hallways. Usually if you had late practice, there was nobody around anyway. And so we began doing things there with just some different athletic specific drills there, and also some ball handling stuff there. And we'd like to have our guys sweating when they came into the gym if we were having late practice, things of that nature there, so we don't feel like we just have to shoot for 5 minutes randomly and kill time there. Mm-hmm. With church night maybe on Wednesday nights or Thursday nights, wherever it might be in your various part of the state, that was always a factor. So you're fighting just so many things in terms of facilities, and we just felt that those were a few things to maybe combat that.
Okay, great. They say the master of all is the master of none.
Yeah.
And trying to coach this game with all the different approaches and different ways to play, I know that the best coaches out there and the ones that are consistently successful are those that do keep the game pretty simple and have it pretty much boiled down to some anchors, and which I like to call the top three. But what would you characterize as your top three here?
Actually saw some of your literature on that last spring. I heard you speak at a clinic, and we put together a booklet for our staff, and it's probably too long. And having gone through that eternal self-evaluation process, the three that we really looked at and said, this is where we really want to hang our hat and sink our teeth into are, number one, we want to be competitive. And that's obviously a general term, but what that means is we want to be a team that really competes hard on the defensive end, really challenges shots, and really gets after the loose balls, and just being a really ultra-competitive team. The second thing would be we want to be a quality rebounding team. We do spend time on it. We chart it quite a bit. We use a lot of things in our program from Jerry Krause, assistant coach at Gonzaga, who really talked about the rebounding efficiency percentage, really breaking it down to each person and each shot and what they should do. And then the third thing is taking care of the basketball. We think that's really important for us, just to take care of the ball, limit our turnovers, and those are the three things that we harp on. We shared that earlier with our kids here in the preseason, that those are the things that we're going to continue to really wrap our arms around each practice, and then obviously build out from there. But at the end of the day, those are going to be kind of our core three that we really come back to.
Great. Great. Any other things you want to?
Yeah, I'll talk about recruiting in high school.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great.
You know, in terms of high school, you hear a lot about recruiting, and I think sometimes it's associated as a dirty word in the high school ranks, but truth be told, we all recruit to various degrees. Even within your own school setting, maybe it's trying to get players out. Maybe it's trying to keep players interested. Maybe it is trying to keep kids away from a neighboring school. But I think more than anything, it's just about keeping kids bought into your program and giving them a reason to want to play basketball for the particular program that you're involved with. And again, sometimes there's negative connotations associated with that, but I think it's important as a coach to constantly do that. When I was coaching at Waukee, we had Dowling Catholic right down the street from us, and Mike O'Connor is a good coach, good friend of mine, and I didn't look at him or Dowling as being the competition. I guess I looked at it as being my responsibility to keep the Waukee kids in Waukee, and I felt the same way in Chicago, to keep the kids who were in our school system in our school system. And that if I had a good program that the kids wanted to be a part of, they would stay. And maybe we would get other kids as a result of that. I don't know. But I think it's really important to give kids in your program something that they can feel good about, something that they can call their own, and something that will ultimately make them want to play for you and want to play better for you.
Mm-hmm. Last question. When you walk into a gym as a college coach recruiting young players for your program, and you sit in the stands, what is it that you're looking for?
When I first started evaluating as a college coach 3 years ago, it was, well, how well do they shoot, or how well do they handle the basketball? And anymore, it's how hard do they compete? How hard do they do the little things away from the basketball? What does their body language look like when things don't go right? We really like to, when we go watch a kid, we almost, and don't want to take this wrong, almost want to see them struggle or their team struggle a little bit, because in college it will happen. In high school, sometimes you're such a dominant player, such a dominant team, that you don't face the adversity, but there will be tough days in college, and we want to see how kids can handle that type of variables that are presented upon them.